Hello, everyone. This is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about season 22 of the challenge, which is Battle of the Exes. So, I watched this season for the first time over a year ago, and I thought it was a decent season. The theme was pretty nice, with exes being paired together for the first time in the show's history. The format with the power couple choosing one couple to send to elimination, and the person who gets last placed automatically is sent into elimination, and I liked that. It was very simplistic. I didn't get too much of it, but I thought it was a pleasant enough watch. But now that I've watched it again with the history of the challenge and the players up to this point, and to have that full context and historical depth, I kind of dropped on it. I think one of the reasons why I don't really care for it, especially compared to almost everyone else who has this pretty high, is that one of the reasons is that the rookie class is irrelevant here. I think out of all the rookie seasons, sorry, off all of the seasons that had rookies, this one was the weakest, the least notable, and they're all gone by episode 3 without doing anything worthwhile. So that was disappointing. There were also a few DQs that kind of stalled and fucked up the pacing of the season, since when you look at it, there's only really like 8 or 9 rounds, and they stretched out those last few episodes to make up for all of the DQs and really just slowed things down, in my opinion. The politics really wasn't much to talk about, in my opinion. It's mainly just Mark and Johnny running things, CT not really being an underdog, but he and DM having to kind of just play on their own. And then most of the other people really just weren't relevant to the politics of the season. There really wasn't a whole lot of drama in the season outside of Jasmine punching Tyree. Then there's that awful blackface scandal, and then just Camilla losing it on Johnny. While some of that's memorable, there's also that awful Vinny and Maddie incident, which was just awful. But there really was a whole lot of drama here, and the drama that was on the season just really wasn't fun to watch. Some of the couples were very good. We had one of the OG couples in Mark and Robin. CT and DM is the romantic couple of the challenge. Who else was there? I didn't like the repeat pairings of Sarah and Vinny and Wes and Mandy. Anissa and Rachel, while it was cool to see lesbian pairing there, I definitely think that Anissa only was paired with Rachel because Jen retired from the show at this point, since Anissa and Rachel's hookup wasn't even on the show, while Jen and Rachel's were. And this also causes for the discussion of there being a lack of a gay couple on the season. And apparently they tried to get Ryan and Davis, but it fell through for some reason. And I do think that overall the couples were decent, though some of them were kind of just not the best. Especially, like I mentioned earlier, the repeat pairings, which just wasn't as fun. At the same time, I felt like a lot of the dynamics between some of these pairings and couplings to really not be that interesting, and there really wasn't a whole lot of history that was delved into pertaining these pairings. So I think that's why it was one of the more disappointing elements of the season for me. I will say that the dailies were actually pretty good for the most part, and I did enjoy it. And while the eliminations were kind of repetitive, I did find most of them to be pretty good as well. So from the competitive point of view when it comes to the actual challenges, I did like that, so yeah. Just when I think of the season, I don't have the highs that I have for even a lot of the other mid-tier seasons. There are some seasons where there isn't a lot of drama or strategy, but the dynamics and the characters were just so strong and interesting here. And while we learned a lot about CT and DM, they're good enough for a lot of other people to kind of just ignore some of the faults with this season, but it isn't good enough for me. So that's why I most likely have it lower than most, though it isn't a bad season at all. So another thing that I definitely want to address now is the whole prize splitting thing. This has been something that was done from the very early seasons, but back in the day they aired it on the show, but that was when it was a summer campy vibe. They wanted the show to go into a more competitive direction, but with people creating deals where they would all get to the end together to split the winnings, it takes away the competitive element of the show, and it makes some of the eliminations very staged and kind of boring and anticlimactic. And apparently this was one of the last seasons where they really started getting tired of it, and they became a lot more strict with it. And I do think that it explains why the season kind of is what it is, and it lacked a lot of the other positives that some of the other seasons that had prize winnings had. So the other seasons had elements that you can kind of overlook the prize splitting causing for a less competitive season, but the season just doesn't have that. The cast of this season are in the Dominican Republic and are told that this season is Exes. The teams are Emily and Ty, Jasmine and Tyree, Leroy and Naomi, Abram and Carmaria, though they weren't broken up at this point in time, Anissa and Rachel, which was 2003 and never shown on the show, Camilla and Johnny, which never happened on camera, but it's on trend for him, and we'll get more into that later, CT and DM, which is clearly the biggest ex couple, Paula and Dunbar, who now hate one another, especially after Cutthroat, Dustin and Heather, Mandy and Wes, which is a repeat partner from them being partnered together on Fresh Meat 2, which is Lane, Mark and Robin, one of the OG showmances of the challenge, Nate and Priscilla, and Sarah and Vinny, another repeat partner from Fresh Meat 2. First place wins $150,000, second place wins $100,000, and third place wins $40,000. The elimination is called the Dome this season, where the last place team in the daily will automatically be going into elimination, and the other opponent will be chosen by the power couple, which is the pair that wins the dailies this season. So they all have pictures of all the ex-parents in the house, and Naomi clearly still has feelings for Leroy. Jasmine smashes and rips her pictures with Tyree, and CT shows DM their pictures, where she just started treatment, and I think it's of them in the duel. Everyone has to wear their speedos/bathing suits for the challenge, and the rookies are plotting about how they are going to send in either Paula or Johnny if they win. The daily is Give Me Some Honey, where they have to transfer honey to one another, which are in bathtubs with their bodies, and then they have to scoop the honey off their partner's bodies into another container. It's clearly a challenge that was meant to sexually stimulate us as the audience. Nate and Priscilla are last, so they're definitely going in. And the tiebreaker between Mark and Robin and Johnny and Camilla takes place, with the latter winning. Johnny speaks to Dustin and Heather about them doing well in their challenge, especially for rookies, and they're making their pitch without actively making deals. But they know that the rookies always go in, so it's kind of just fruitless at this point. Wes speaks to Camilla about how he's going to get all of the rookies to get in with him to go after Johnny, and Camilla does not appreciate this. Why the hell would Wes tell Camilla about this? Which is about her partner, meaning if Johnny's in danger, she's going in danger with him. And they are the current power couple who determines who stays and who goes to elimination. CT tells Bananas that Wes is shit-talking him, essentially, and Camilla reports everything back to Bananas. He speaks to Wes about his strategy, and Wes mentions that he does not respect how Bananas plays the game, and he ends up cutting off Camilla. Mandy is confused about what happened, and he realizes that he opened his mouth too much. The newer players are telling DM about how they wanted to envision she and CT back together, and they were inspired by their relationship. And when she talks about how she broke up with him because she didn't like certain attitudes, especially on the Gauntlet 3, she's still not over him hooking up with Siobhan, which happened like 3 years ago at this point, and she wants to focus on her career. He speaks in the confessional and to Mandy about how he expected DM to be at his brother's wake, and she essentially abandoned him. Johnny and Camilla vote in Wes and Mandy into elimination. Priscilla speaks to Nate about how they need a plan, and he isn't taking any of it seriously. X knocks the sport is the elimination, where they're all standing on a block, and there are large teeth that are swinging, where they either have to jump or duck them. Wes and Mandy do beat Nate and Priscilla, and we see CT and DM have a tough conversation about how they're going to handle the season. So Nate seemed like someone who had that southern personality, and could have potentially, emphasis on potentially and not actuality, been comedic enough, but he was also just kind of lame as well. And Priscilla is very forgettable as hell, and didn't do anything notable whatsoever. Both of them are very forgettable, and I'm not shocked that they never came back. Wes wants to get back with Mandy again and mentions that he would like to get with her since he screwed it up after Rivals, but she is now in a relationship and she isn't interested in getting with him again. But Wes doesn't care about her boyfriend. Vinny is talking about Sarah and how they hooked up a bit on Fresh Meat 2, of course, and they're kind of joking about it in front of everyone, and she's embarrassed for hooking up with someone that is so stupid. Naomi's tracks are being made fun of by Leroy, and that's a very off-code thing to say and do this in front of other people, especially non-black people, but she thinks that he still has feelings for her. Naomi rants about this to Jasmine, and Jasmine mentions that they only kissed, where Tyree still wants her, though she does not want him. Tyree is hearing their conversation over the balcony, and he ends up ranting to Jasmine. She ends up walking up to him, and they both end up intensely arguing, where he calls her a bitch and how she can kiss his black ass, and he literally moons her while doing this. Jasmine literally punches him in his face, or attempts to punch him in his face. I don't know where she landed, but she definitely punched him, and absolutely nothing is done about it, showing the challenges inconsistency regarding violence, though everyone is laughing at their drama, and something tells me that they're laughing at it because she's a woman hitting a man and she is so tiny hitting someone who is so big. Hookup is a challenge where they have to walk across beams above the ocean while locking their canes to a hook. Johnny and Camilla and Sarah and Vinny have to perform in a tiebreaker, where the last place team is Leroy and Naomi. Sarah and Vinny do win the challenge, and Sarah is thinking about sitting in Tyree and Jasmine, as their drama is hazardous to the house, and Tyree and Jasmine outright mention that it is bullshit. Wes and Mandy make their pitch, and Vinny is not over Wes voting him in during Fresh Meats 2. They all go out to the club, and Anissa is having a good time hooking or dancing up with the hot, in her words, Leroy, which ends up annoying Naomi. And we have the unfortunate moment of Vinny ripping Mandy's shirt off, and she outright slaps him, and I'm glad that was her immediate reaction to him. Of course, she justifiably feels violated about it, or justifyingly feels violated about it, and she rants to Wes about it, who decides to not punch Vinny since they will be sent home. Vinny asks Mark what he thinks will happen, meaning, does he think that he, i.e. Vinny, will go home? And Mark mentions that he doesn't know. It seems like they're all kind of sketchy about the situation, since Tanya's lawsuit with Evan and Kenny was just filed before the season started filming. Vinny does decide to nominate Wes and Mandy and mentions that Wes is ugly, and this whole situation just doesn't make him look, where he's nominated the person that he victimized. And Wes calls out Vinny for ripping Mandy's shirt and then nominating her, where Vinny mentions that he would not like it if Wes mentions that Vinny wouldn't like it if someone did that to his female family members. Sarah, with her male identified as, does agree with the vote as she speaks to Wes about the situation, where he doesn't think that she will go home with Vinny, but thinks that Vinny will be replaced. TJ does decide to pull Vinny and Sarah, and I don't know why they did this after the deliberations, where they could have done it before the deliberations and they wouldn't have had an elimination, and then had to revamp their entire schedule later on in the season. Sarah has a huge reaction to this, where she runs yelling and crying, and she also calls out Vinny for ruining things for her, and he refuses to say anything to her. I don't know why Vinny was given so many chances when he never lasted over 2 to 3 episodes in any season, and he wasn't really notable in any of his other seasons. After this awful situation, he deserved to never come back, and he didn't offer shit to the show, so good riddance. A part of me did feel really bad for Sarah with being pulled for something she never did, in addition to feeling more bad because of how she reacted and the anger she had, but a part of me did feel that to go away with her voting in Mindy after her partner violated her, and it kind of just shows how Sarah talks her talk, but when it comes to it, she tends to be male identified more often than not. This is far from the last we will see of Sarah, and she did deserve more chances after this, though it's unfortunate since she and her partner were performing well in the challenges, and probably would have made it far here. X Battle is the elimination where it is essentially a pole wrestle, and Leeway is excited to compete in his first elimination. I think I might have forgot to mention that Leeway and Naomi were automatically sent to elimination for being last on the daily. Leeway does beat Wes for the guys, and Mandy beats Naomi for the girls. This causes for a sudden death round to take place, and it flips to the guys, and Leeway beats Wes again, and I honestly wish that meant Sorry. I wish that Wes and Mandy stayed for the betterment of the season, especially with Leroy and Naomi going home soon right afterwards anyways. Leroy and Naomi speak about him downplaying their relationship, and it causes for them to argue, where he calls her territorial and nothing is going to happen with them, but he won't hook up with any other woman in front of her, and he also does not want her sleeping in his bed. This was around the point in Wes's career where he was starting to underperform, and he would be known for his quote-unquote sketchy strategy that never went anywhere. It seems like he replaced Kenny with bananas pertaining their feud, and I do appreciate the way he defended Mandy, but he was definitely struggling without some of his major storylines. It's a shame that this was Mandy's last season, with the whole Vinny situation taking place, being thrown in by him, and then winning her part in the elimination. I do think her and Wes would have made the season more interesting, but I also heard she wanted a break, but when she was interested later on in this era to come back, production was not interested. So thought them being paired here was pretty weird, but I'm assuming that they're paired together because I guess they didn't want to pair Mandy up with Chet, and Johanna made it clear that she was done with the show by this point, and Kellyanne was done with the show by this point as well. Of course, she would return well later on, but that wasn't. Now, according to this point in time challenge history, we have a bunch of pranks between the men and the women where they are throwing water and other stuff at one another, and it seems more fun and lighthearted compared to last season when this was happening. We see Carmaria and Abram talking, where she wants him to be more social and enjoy the experience more, but he doesn't care to hang out with people who will fuck him over and people he wouldn't hang out with in real life. And this conversation really isn't going anywhere. Dustin got injured by the stairs and his kneecap is open, so he has to go to the hospital to get stitches. He comes back and tells the house that he got 5 stitches, where he has to wait for a week, and there are challenges that take place in that portion, so his chances aren't looking good just from this. Dustin and Heather are pulled from the cast and the show right before the daily starts. I don't have much to say about Dustin and Heather here. They were performing pretty well regarding the rookies, and while I don't think they would have made it to the end, maybe they would have lasted a few more episodes. I know they dated after this, though they might have been dating during this, which is kind of problematic because why are you casting a couple that's currently dating on a show about exes, meaning people who are not dating anymore? Anyways, we will see Dustin again, but this was an underwhelming one for Heather, who never gets another chance after this. Mental Connection is the daily where they have to lay on the board above the ocean and answer trivia questions, and if you get it wrong, you are thrown into the ocean. Anissa splits her lip as she falls into the water, so she is taken by the ambulance to get stitches. The daily is tied between Paula and Dunbar and Anissa and Rachel, though Rachel essentially did it on her own. And a tie between the two worst teams, which are Abram and Carmaria and Leroy and Naomi. So there needs to be 2 tiebreakers. Paula wins the power couple for herself, and Dunbar and Leroy and Naomi are going into the dump for eviction yet again, due to losing another daily. Paula and Dunbar speak to Emily and Ty about why they should not go in, and Paula and Dunbar don't know what to do, since Paula doesn't really like being in power since she feels like she can't handle it. They speak to Carmaria and Abram for the latter to give their case, since they were second to last, and Carmaria throws Emily under the bus, since she is very strong. DM talks about her cancer story to Abram, which led to her relationship with CT, and then talking about their breakup, where she says that they should have. Sorry. It was her intention for them to have a break for 5 years, and Abram thinks that her demand is essentially utterly ridiculous. Abram feels like Carmaria keeps him at a distance, and after hearing more about their relationship in the present tense and stuff that we found out after this season, it makes Carmaria's behavior a lot more justified. Paula and Dunbar do choose Emily and Ty to go in, and it makes sense, they're one of their newer teams. Emily outright states that Paula is scared, and Naomi doesn't think that it's fair due to the size difference. But that's how shit goes on the challenge, so oh well. Leroy feels confident in his own abilities, especially after defeating Wes, who is the elimination king, but is worried about his partner Naomi, which is fair based on her performance in the last elimination where she lost to Mandy twice. Emily speaks to Ty to cheer him up for the elimination, since she is worried about his performance, since he performed horribly on the cutthroat elimination where he kind of passed out against Brandon, but he doesn't really want to do anything before the elimination. The elimination is banded together, where they are connected to their partner with a rubber band, and they both have to hold on to the pole across, where they have to hold on to it for 5 seconds. We will see this elimination sporadically throughout the more recent years, or even some of the more immediate succeeding seasons after this, and it's really a strength of endurance more than anything else. Emily and Ty do end up beating Leroy and Naomi. Cara Maria and Abram talk about their relationship issues yet again, and he keeps on venting about how women have screwed him in the past. I do feel like Leroy and Naomi's interactions could have been interesting had they lasted longer, where they did have some tension and issues. In general, this is definitely a disappointing showing for Leroy, especially this being his sophomore performance, despite him beating Wes. But clearly, this isn't going to hold him back, and we will see him many more times. Honestly, it's clear that Naomi isn't meant for the challenge, but they do give her one more chance. But even that chance was screwed due to outside reasons, which is justifiable, and we'll get more into that there. Bananas and Camilla are getting along really well at this point, and DM is talking to Robin about her issues with CT as a partnership in the game. Apparently, Robin is struggling socially, according to Mark, and she has a lot to deal with. And we have Tyree and Jasmine arguing in the middle of their party, or the house party, and he has to be pulled away by DM. Jasmine is venting. I don't remember to whom she's venting to. And she's venting to CT, and he actually gives her some encouraging advice on how to deal with Tyree. CT and DM finally speak about their issues and how they need to communicate better so they can perform better as a team. And she claims that he consistently speaks over her. Rolling in the deep is the daily where they have to hold onto the log for as long as possible, as they are held above water. I don't really have any thought on this daily, and we hear Jasmine and Tyree and Camilla and Abram mention that they are on the chopping block, so it's clear that they know the hierarchy in the house doesn't favor them. Tyree and Jasmine end up getting last place, only by a second compared to Mark and Robin, who are second to last, and there has to be a tiebreaker for first place, with Bananas and Camilla and Ty and Emily, with the former winning yet again. We see Bananas and Mark plot, and Bananas is still not over Rachel voting for him over Abram on the island a million years ago. Rachel technically says that it's 5 years ago, so yeah. I don't even know if it's 5 years ago. I think she said 4 years ago. Either way, it was forever ago. Mike is trying to defend Rachel since they are good friends outside of the game. He tells Rachel that she is in danger and mentions something about the island, where she doesn't get why something that happened 4 years ago is being brought up. Johnny and Camilla are having some sort of a pizza date, and she mentions that Rachel campaigned against Mark and Robin, which Johnny is confused by since Mark was literally advocating for her not too long ago. They tell Mark this, and he is pissed off since he essentially helped her win the duel too, since they were partners for so many of the dailies on that season. Rachel speaks to Anissa about being worried, and they know that the couple is avoiding speaking to them, which is a sign that they are probably going to be nominated. Paula and Ty are getting very close since she's attracted to him despite having a boyfriend. Mark speaks to Rachel about her supposedly campaigning against him, and she swears that she never did this, and they made it up to send her in and to justify it. Rachel speaks to Johnny, and the two of them are arguing about the island, and him claiming that she threw Mark under the bus. He mentions to Anissa that she, i.e. Anissa, did nothing wrong, and that it is all Rachel's fault. Johnny and Camilla vote in Rachel and Anissa, specifically mentioning Rachel. Camilla mentions that Rachel said that Robin does not deserve to be there, so it does seem like Camilla twisted the entire conversation, and Robin is shocked that people feel this way about her. Robin speaks to Paula about this, and she is starting to rant about this, as she does not want to lose her integrity, especially since she is fighting for her child and she hates to politic. The elimination is X knocks the spot, and Rachel and Anissa thus beats Tyree and Jasmine. Technically, Rachel beats the both of them since Anissa fell off first, and you start to see a pattern here with their partnership regarding the challenges. Rachel and Anissa are speaking about how they're alone in the house, and Rachel is determined to go after bananas now. Jasmine and Kyrie definitely had a toxic dynamic, which some could say was entertaining, especially compared to the other couples that didn't have much of a dynamic at all. But we literally saw her punch him and absolutely nothing was done, and their arguments were uncomfortable. Apparently, he wanted her and she had no interest. I'm so glad that Kyrie's longer than necessary run is coming to an end, and Jasmine has a lot more ahead of her in the future. Everyone is at the club where we see Paula and Kai have quote unquote innocent flirting, and we see Cara Maria and Abram kissing one another. She talks about him moving to Massachusetts with her, which he sees as a huge step. We do know that this went the other way around, where she eventually moved to Montana for him. Camilla is drunk and picks a fight with Bananas about how he can hook up with whomever and she's going to have fun as well. She is dancing on a bunch of strangers and Emily tells her that they have to go, but she tries to shoo Emily away. Camilla then decides to sleep in Johnny's bed. Ty tells her to go to her own room in her own bed, and she throws the very first Camillinator round, where she throws a bunch of chairs across the room. She walks herself into the pool, and Johnny calls Camilla an idiot. And this should be the first of many Camillinator rounds, and this would be repeated every season, sometimes more than once in a season. So he tells Paula that she is talking to a wall, which causes Camilla to rant even more, but she rants about how much she hates him, how he is a cheater, who is going to die. Yikes. The only thing that Camilla remembers the next morning is that she tried to throw a chair. Don't Rock the Boat is the challenge where two teams are competing and they have to climb on large cylinders and walk to ring the bell. The two teams with the fastest time will compete against one another in a tiebreaker. I do enjoy this daily, and it's really a sign of teamwork. 3 seconds separates the loser, with Carmia and Abram getting last over CT and DM, with Mike and Robin and Johnny and Camilla competing to see who is the power couple. Emily and Ty are salty that they came in third to those two. Mark and Robin win the daily, and people are commenting about the old Robin coming back, which is kind of a theme throughout the season, with people talking about how Robin is so different this season. Abram is thrilled to be going into elimination, and Rachel and Anissa give Mark and Robin a pitch and a t-shirt, where they are trying to make amends, and Robin is annoyed that Mark mentioned my decision instead of our decision, as he does not listen to her, and it's kind of a repeated thing between the two of them this season. Emily and Ty make their pitch, and Mark makes it clear that he is leaning that way, where Robin doesn't have the same thoughts, but they are just not in the same place. We have more bickering about Abram and Carmaria, where she wants them to move together in a year and not immediately, and he is tired of her indecision. I don't care about the Bananas and Camilla bickering at this point, where she realizes that she likes him more than he likes her. Mark and Robin decide to throw in Emily and Ty, since they are newer. CT talks about the sexual tension between Paula and Ty right in front of them. We get the elimination, which is X Battle, where Emily easily beats Cara Maria. This apparently caused Cara Maria to get into CrossFit and to bulk up. And Ty beats Abram in a close battle. Cara Maria and Abram being on the season is weird, since it's clear that they are still together, but apparently it happened because Coral rejected being on the show with Abram. Watching their interactions now are more cringy, knowing more about their relationship dynamics being borderline, if not outright abusive, according to certain narratives, is awkward to watch. Abram is clearly winding down career-wise regarding the challenge, and this was probably Carmilla at her weakest as a competitor, but it does cause her to change how she approaches the challenge in the future. Paula and Ty are flirting about having children together, and Paula realizes that she needs to tread very lightly, though clearly she already broke that by this point. If you're joking about having children with someone who's not your boyfriend. Camilla and Johnny talk about how she needs to be careful with the drinking and they need to focus more. Rachel and Anissa are plotting to send Johnny and Camilla in if they win, and Mark comments about Robin performing better this season, but he still needs to keep her in mental check, where Ty and Emily are good with one another at this moment. Lube Me Up is the challenge where they have to go down a slide and to get a ball, and if there are none, they have to steal one from someone else. It's a really fun challenge since it is physical, but it's also endurance due to the slipperiness, and you have to kind of maintain your position so you can go up and endure it. Johnny and Camilla win yet another daily, which is just boring in my opinion, and Paula and Dunbar are going right into elimination for being last place. Anissa is not pleased with Rachel since they had a plan in the daily and it didn't follow through, and Rachel is annoyed with Anissa as well, as they both had the advantage of both of them playing in the women's round, so they should have had the advantage, essentially. Johnny tells Anissa and Rachel that it is either them or Ty and Emily that is going in, and Camilla mentions that the two women did gang up on her in the daily. Emily and Ty do tell Johnny and Camilla that they will come back if they are thrown into an elimination, where Johnny makes a deal with them to not go after one another, essentially. Robin speaks to Paula about who she wants to go against, and Paula wants anyone but Emily and Ty. Since Emily beat her last season not last season, on Cutthroat in an elimination. Dunbar speaks to Johnny about Paula, and he snaps on Dunbar for no reason, essentially. And Johnny is claiming to not want, or he's claiming to not want to have any power. But when has Johnny Bananas, before this or after this, never wanted power? It's just weird. Honestly, it's just BS, and it comes out of nowhere. At least that's how it looks like on the edit. Paula and Ty look like they're about to fuck in the club, and as he is wrapping her legs around him, and the cast is outright trying to get them to hook up, where they kiss with a lemon in their mouths, and they start to get physical. Clearly, they didn't give a single shit about her boyfriend or her relationship with her boyfriend. Anyways, CT tells DM that Ty and Paula look at one another in the way that they used to look at each other, and she claims that the two situations are not the same, since they are a fling and they were in a relationship. They continue arguing about the relationship, where he ended up moving on, and DM is mad about it since he didn't want to wait 5 years for her. Ty tells Paula that she is his girl and he loves her, which is just so ridiculous since yeah, the other man on the challenge, where people are notorious for hooking up and nothing happening after the season wraps. But CT and DM continue arguing on the bus ride back, where he mentions that his entire family hated her and he wants her to leave him alone, since she left him hanging. DM has to be consoled by Paula and Rachel, and Anissa has to be consoled by Anissa has to console CT, where he mentions not meeting her family, and Rachel states that he is holding on to things from 6 years ago, and it's all just really messy and almost borderline uncomfortable. We have more Paula and Ty hooking up, and they play some sexy R&B music behind it, which is so damn corny because, of course, whenever a black man hooks up with someone, they have to play some sexual R&B music with it. But we do see Anissa and Emily observing and laughing at it, so I got some keys out of that at least. Anyways, Johnny and Camilla chose Anissa and Rachel to go into elimination, which Paula is happy about, since she won't bring up the alien again, since she feels like Johnny did her a favor here. They do compete in band together, and Anissa and Rachel lose against Dunbar and Paula. CT and DM are still on icy terms, and Paula and Ty are getting closer, much to Emily's chagrin. In general, I do think this is one of Anissa's more forgettable seasons, especially since this isn't one of the seasons where she isn't booted early, so she made it a decent way, but still didn't really do anything notable. Rachel had an interesting role this season, with the weird tension with Mark and her not having any numbers, with her continued feud with Bananas, and seeing her be so politically messy, which is very fun to watch. Though, if you look at even her earlier seasons, this has kind of been on trend with her. This was her last season for over a decade until she came back for All Stars 4 and season 40, so I'm glad that she got into it again, despite her returns being less than dismal. Though I do think that things would have been more interesting had Jen been her partner instead of Anissa here. Everyone is sailing to Paradise Island, and the cast is having fun, where Paula and Ty are getting closer and kissing in public, and Emily doesn't like this at all. Emily speaks to Ty about how things were wrong with them in DC, and she was triggered by saying he loves her to Paula, which she heard, since he said the same thing to Emily as well, and she's clearly very jealous. They're showing us how close the two of them are despite all of that, only to dig into what will happen later on in the episode. DM is kind of freaking out because she and CT haven't spoken in 2 to 3 days, and they ignore one another whenever both of them are in a room together. And Tai tells her that that he and her, meaning CT and DM, just can't ignore one another. Tai is not into getting into fights with people anymore, and to get rid of that negative energy. It seemed like he came into the season wanting to be a bit more likable and showing a more humane side of him. We do see DM and CT speak where the duel to ruin things for them, and he apologizes to her about what happened, and she apologizes for not being there for his brother's funeral, and he claims that his family didn't dislike her, and he only said that to make her mad. The daily is Race to the Altar, where they have to wear wedding attire and to complete a series of races/tasks, and the final person who lasts after several rounds ends up winning the power couple. I do like the daily, but I would be lying if a bunch of the appeal of it isn't them just wearing their wedding attire while doing it. Tai and Emily are automatically going into elimination for getting last, and CT and DM beat Paula and Dunbar in the daily to be the power couple. CT and DM plot about who to send in, and they ask Mark and Robin about who they would send in if they won, and they mention that he wouldn't target Johnny, but he wouldn't worry about that until they got there. That's what Mark's kind of saying. He's kind of just trying to talk around it, saying, oh, that isn't the situation I'm in, so it doesn't matter. And Robin doesn't say anything during this interrogation. And essentially, CT doesn't trust Mark. They speak to Bananas and Camilla, and Johnny mentions that he doesn't like answering hypotheticals, where Paula throws Johnny and Camilla right under the bus so quickly, since they haven't seen the dome all season. It is party time, but it is separated by gender, with a bachelor party and a bachelorette party. Tai and Paula realize that their time may be coming to an end together in the season, as they are probably going to be facing elimination against one another. Camilla is drunk as hell, so she and Emily decide to dress up as Paula and Tai, with Emily wearing blackface, where she asks Camilla if it's racist, indicating that she has some sort of idea that this is somewhat racist. Of course, Camilla's racist ass, yes, I'm saying racist ass, says that it isn't racist. The house is completely shocked with what is happening, and you can just see the horror on their faces, and Tai outright calls out how racist it is. Camilla only sees it as a joke, and Tai is handling it as best as he can, because I would have handled it a lot worse than he would have if I was in that situation. But Tai wants to go home right now, since his partner is doing that, or his partner doing it as essentially a slap in the face. He speaks to Emily about how he is going home, and she doesn't care at the moment. Paula and Bananas attempts to get him to stay, and Emily is trying to speak to him, but it causes for an argument to happen, and she doesn't understand the blackface. And he tells her to never speak to him again, and she tells him that she isn't racist. It was funny, and she essentially says, fuck you. So, bad response by Emily. She mentions that she grew up in a cult as some sort of justification, and people like Mark mention, of course in the confessional and not to her face, that it really isn't an excuse. Tai manages to stay for the night after being convinced to stay by a few of the cast members, and to see if he'll change his mind the next morning. Paula and Tai end up getting even closer as they talk about Emily. Emily is now crying about the entire situation, and Tai does decide to stay the next morning, where they do decide to speak. He mentions that he mentions that it isn't about her being racist, which he doesn't think that she's racist, but her motivations for it, which is essentially being jealous about Paula. And she does apologize to him, which he does accept. Honestly, the situation is just really, really awful. It should have never happened. And the fact that you felt like you needed to change your skin tone, or that's what you went for to make fun of someone that you're jealous over, really is just a horrible look. CT wants to send in Johnny and Camilla, and DM says that her gut is telling her to send in Paula and Dunbar, as she sees them as the biggest threats, and they're having this conversation literally right before the deliberation. But they do decide to send in Paula and Dunbar. And of course, there's a lot of debate about whether this was a good choice or not. And it's clear, in my opinion, that DM was doing this to protect Johnny, since apparently he took her to treatment and all that stuff, and they're actually very good friends outside of the house. Paula is not shocked with the decision, and Dunbar actually is shocked, where he does tell CT that everyone is going to throw them in no matter what if they lose the next round, and Emily finds it ironic, since Paula threw them in when she won the power couple, so she kind of doesn't really feel bad for Paula in this instance. TJ outright calls CT and DM dumb for not nominating either Johnny or Mark, and he specifically only mentions their names and not the women. And we do get the elimination called Hall Pass, where they have to grab their color designated balls and to run it back, where they will probably be contact. And we saw this elimination last season. Ty beats Dunbar and Emily beats Paula, so Paula and Dunbar loses. Paula definitely came off as more likable this season, despite her cheating on her boyfriend all throughout the season. But we did see her and Dunbar get along, especially with how coldly things ended between them on Cutthroat. Dunbar was more of a background character, and he came off as more likable here, but I think it's because we weren't seeing him much and he didn't really have much going on. Both of them have one more season left, and it's interesting that they retired at the same time as well. So this is kind of them winding down. Johnny and Camilla are talking about how they cannot get last in the daily, as they feel like they can do well otherwise. Robin is speaking about how she has done 9 seasons in the show, or on the show, and DM, Ty, and Emily all speak about how they want to get to know her, and how things have gone such downhill for her, since she only cares to win money for her son, and she's very defensive. DM talks about how Robin was a beak of positivity in the beginning of her career, and that glamour went away. And I wonder if her addiction was what DM was referring to at this point. Feel the Burn is the daily where they have to run to get beach equipment while the airplane is being blown in their direction, and set up the same set on the other end. Honestly, it's definitely my least favorite daily of the season thus far, and I just kind of found it boring to watch. But Johnny and Camilla do end up getting dead last, and CT and DM win the daily over Ty and Emily. We have Johnny and Camilla bickering about the stress, and we do see Robin and Emily campaigning to DM about the situation. And Robin doesn't want to leave the season with nothing for her child. Ty speaks to CT and DM about how CT really is a fighter and mentions his brother, and Ty doesn't want to be thrown in for a 4th time, where Mark is aware about bullshitting his way out of eliminations for 17 years, which is the time frame he stated, but his time is off, because 1, his road rule season isn't a challenge season. Heck, his first challenge season isn't really a challenge season, and he only did technically 2 seasons before this that had eliminations. So, talking his way out of eliminations for 17 years, not accurate. Anyways, CT outright tells Mark and Robin that they haven't done anything in the season, so it's clear that CT is leaning towards them. CT and DM do nominate Mark and Robin to go into elimination. Bananas and Mark decide to randomly strip to their underwear after deliberations, and they're kinda sad about being thrown in against one another, since they are good friends and were working so well together this season. Mark talks about how this is his last challenge ever, which already aired poorly since he was begging to come back like 2 years after this, but they weren't calling him. So he wants to win some money, but what they didn't show is that Mark and Bananas agreed for Mark to throw it to Bananas since he didn't believe that Robin would do well in the final, despite them getting 40K guaranteed if they got third. And Mark is about getting the money first and foremost. Anyways, the pairs are at the club with CT, DM, Emily, and Ty all having fun, while we see Mark and Johnny not being thrilled at all. Robin knows that she does poorly in eliminations, and people are trying to cheer her up, but she has a defeatist attitude, and she knows that she never makes it to the end, and she talks about her son, Ethan. The elimination is X Battle, and Mark brought out his bandana from his OG Road Rule season in 1995, I believe. It might be 1994, but whatever. Mid 90s. And he talks about it being his last one. Anyways, Camilla does beat Robin, and it's a close round, though we do see some dramatization and televisation, but Mark essentially throws it to Bananas, where their round was pretty close. It was a wash for Camilla and Robin. Mark makes this huge retirement announcement, and we have a bunch of flashbacks over his relationship with Murray and Bunham from his first Road Rule seasons all the way up until now. And honestly, I'm just rolling my eyes because it's another retirement that Mark did not stick with. There wasn't much tension between Mark and Robin throughout the season, which makes sense because their breakup was so many years ago. It was nice seeing Robin perform better in the past, but Mark didn't believe in her, and it wouldn't be shocking if her addiction issues were starting around here, and it's really just sad watching the situation, and her mentioning her son, where she doesn't have custody of either of her children as I'm recording this, and her fate as of last year was not good. Mark made fun of his age a bunch of times in the season, And while I do understand him making a deal to guarantee money, I do think it's kind of just a shady and an ass thing to screw Robin and her family out of any money whatsoever. Anyways, I mentioned that he took back his retirement, and he wasn't cast again until he pushed and essentially created what would become All Stars. And he is on there, and this isn't even his last flagship season, as he is on 40. But in general, I just do think that Mark's consistent ways of creating all these deals, which invalidates the final and actively making the season less competitive by him kind of just like breaking the fourth wall and being so dominant, caused production to not want to cast him anymore, especially since they want things to be more dramatic, tense, and competitive. Cast are moving to Iceland for the final, and once they arrive, TJ tells them that they have 24 hours to relax before the final actually starts. The cast has a bunch of layers on for the final, and they're in their hotel room where everyone is getting along. The final, quote unquote, Viking quest, or that's the title of the final, starts, where they have to go through a series of checking points where they get a Viking ketone or stone of some sorts, which they will need for the final part of it. TJ mentions that Iceland only has sun for a few hours in a day, so they will be racing in the dark. They then have to go to the water in the underwear to run into the water to touch a ball where they can get hypothermia in 30 seconds. Whomever does the best will get the best sleeping arrangements where they are sleeping on a glacier. TJ wakes them up and they have to run 12 miles through the glacier to complete checkpoints to get 5 more glacier stones or whatever it is. They have to eat the head of an animal, I don't know what animal it is, and the blood in a horn, where they then move down to the sledding part of the final. DM and CT lose their lead to Johnny and Camilla. One involves some puzzles that I don't care to recap at all. After this, they have to sled through a large snowbank to create some sort of tunnel. We move on to another puzzle, and CT starts to climb up a bit. They have to place the 7 artifacts on the final puzzle to get to the finish line, and CT is essentially dying in the final. What ends up happening is Johnny and Camilla willing over DM and CT, though it is later revealed that they only won due to taking a different path that they shouldn't have taken. It was interesting seeing more of Ty and Emily's dynamic in the season, and the depth of their relationship. And they had a nice enough underdog run throughout the season, with them winning 3 eliminations and almost getting their rookie treatment, despite them not being rookies. But due to all the actual rookies being booted so early, I guess it deflected onto them. Ty definitely came off as a lot more likable and calm this season, though he was the other man in Paul's relationship. Emily completely showed her ass with the blackface situation, but both of them were starting to wind down here, both having one more season after this before retiring, though Emily had a circumstantial return after this. This season was clearly set up to be all about DM and CT, where the former has not done a season in a while, and they definitely had the most in-depth relationship, where we learned a lot more about their dynamics and their history, even if it got too much screen time here and there and it got uncomfortable at times. You really did want them to win, despite the arguments getting uncomfortable with all the layers in it. But it was one of the few captivating things in the season, and this season needed anything that was captivating. I am glad, though, that they didn't hook back up once again, though, at least in this point. I was tired of Johnny and Camilla this season, and I think for a few reasons. I would think that this being his first season without Kenny and Evan would be more exciting, but he's kind of just the same old, and this one was so telegraphed, so props to him, I guess. Camilla showed off her racist ass more than usual up until this point, not even taking accountability for the part that she played in the blackface situation. This is also the start of the Camillinator, which would be very focused on and become a pattern for her for essentially the rest of her time on the franchise. They did work together well on the season, but I was exhausted just watching them. So, this is the first reunion I've had access to since the island, if I remember correctly. But luckily, from now on, I think the reunions in general are a lot more available, so I should be able to cover each reunion from this point onwards, for the most part. Anyways, The Miz is hosting the reunion for the season, and Johnny talks about not having a job since college, and he won it 2 seasons in a row. Apparently, Johnny and Camilla hooked up that night where she had that huge rant, and it was exposed from the others. It was exposed by the others. I think Johnny had a girlfriend or I thought that, which is why he was trying to not talk about it, and I think it's the same thing about their initial hookup. Anyways, Mark pretty much outs that Jonathan would go to the laundry room where production does not know about or they don't go into, and he would create babies with Camilla. That's the word Mark used, which is so weird. And Camilla also reveals that he kind of ghosted her 2 weeks ago and pretended to not see her at some sort of event. Never mind. Johnny actually does admit that he just got out of a relationship, and then he throws a dig about Camilla not knowing English, which, yikes. Everyone gives her 2 cents about the situation, and she talks about how she lost respect for him after watching the show. Rachel mentions that there was a reason why Camilla got jealous during her freakout, since he was acting up with a bunch of prostitutes. Robin and Mark are in discussion where they somewhat stayed in contact, and they were friendly since they did events together before the season, and they didn't have a bad breakup. He mentioned that he had a girlfriend, so he wasn't emotionally available for his partner. Um, I guess he created a distance since they hooked up on the gauntlet too when they broke up, and I guess he didn't want a repeat of that. Anyways, Robin just wanted them to prepare as a team, and he just wasn't willing to do so. The others talked about how Robin did change a lot this season, as she was so paranoid and was just very off. Mark mentions that he started the franchise and will end it, and that part he has acknowledged, and it's interesting how even at the reunion he was kind of trying to take back his retirement. Anyways, Anissa and Rachel's relationship is discussed, where she did do Rachel wrong apparently when it comes to their tryst, and they talk about how they hooked up after Battle of the Sexes 1, which was both of their first season. So it didn't even happen on a season, it was just an off-season hookup that went nowhere. Rachel mentions that she had a serious girlfriend who I think is her current wife as I'm recording this, so she was hyper focused and cognizant of everything, just like Mark. But her wife likes Anissa, so it wasn't that big of a deal. We know that the relationship comes up yet again on season 40, which is crazy. CT and DM's relationship is in discussion, and he does take accountability for most of the issues with the show and the season, since he isn't much of a talker where she is, and she forced him to talk about things that he didn't want to talk about. They don't hate one another anymore, and it seems like they stopped themselves from saying that they were still having feelings there. Camilla and Johnny were talking about how a lot of people want the two of them, i.e., DM and CT, to get back together. Ty and Paula are discussed next, and Emily claims that she was not jealous of the relationship between the two of them, but she knew that Paula can manipulate Ty from a game point of view. And honestly, I don't really know if I believe that. Paula and Ty are not together, and they claim that they're friends, but honestly, just from their interactions, it doesn't really seem like it. And Paula cries about how it affected her relationship, which is no longer a thing at the moment. Paula is really starting to like twitch around, and she's almost spazzing and hiccuping about it, so it's kind of just awkward to watch. Of course, the blackface situation comes up, and Emily claims that she isn't racist, and we get to the whole situation. Emily mentions that she was in a cult, and Camilla was born out of the country. Like Brazil doesn't have well documented racism, but that's just besides the point at this point. Camilla's meltdown was talked about, and she mentions that he messed with her, and Johnny brings up that she was making up with a bunch of men on the same night. The whole Rachel and Mark situation was brought up, and Rachel, even DM, also mentions that Camilla twisted the entire situation, and Camilla didn't even deny it. Johnny, in the defense of Camilla, mentions that Rachel said that Robin was crazy, and Robin gets very defensive about being called crazy, since it's something she's been called all season, and everyone has their issues, so they shouldn't judge her. Now, something tells me that this was kind of a virtue signal of them referring to the big issues that Robin was going through. At the reunion, Mark changes his mind about the retirement due to Twitter. Now that I went over everything regarding the season, again, I definitely am confident in dropping this lower than I had it before my rewatch. Obviously, the strategy really wasn't there for the most part. There are some casting issues that I've noticed with the season, and there really aren't a lot of memorable moments throughout the season, and the drama really wasn't that strong, and the stuff that was there was kind of just awkward to watch, especially with the blackface stuff. The format was pretty good, and the dailies were good, as well as some of the eliminations, so that's kind of one of the more redeemable elements of the season. And even with seasons where there isn't a whole lot of drama, there's usually some other interesting dynamics and stuff that's happening. And I did not find CT and DM to be enough of it. In general, I definitely do think that it's in between some more notable and stronger seasons and more dramatic seasons as well. And you can definitely tell that this was one of the seasons where they were tired of all the double dealing and they wanted things to be a lot more competitive. So some of the OGs were kind of just phased out here. And it's kind of unfortunate because this period of the show is seen as the show's prime, but I don't think that this season in general is prime season. Honestly, I think it's weaker than a lot of the Era 2 seasons and even some of the Era 1 seasons. You really just don't take much from this season, and it has the weakest rookie group ever. Overall, I will say that it is pretty watchable, but it's kind of disappointing because you're not going to get much out of it. And when you're not watching the season or when it's not in your immediate thoughts, you don't really care much for it in general. Anyways, that is it for this season. It was definitely interesting watching the first post JEK season, and I definitely do think that they were struggling. And I also think that this season, with having weaker rookies and some other veterans, some from Era 1, some from Era 2, a lot of the Era 2 crew actually starting to retire, they decided to do a second Battle of the Seasons, and they did this sequel a decade after the first one where they did the first one because they needed a new crop of rookies and some veterans because they were changing the game as they were living in a house and there were going to be vote outs, which eventually turned into eliminations. So they were changing the format, and I do think that they recognized that they needed a lot more new blood to carry this current era, and they weren't getting that with a lot of the veterans, and especially the rookie group from this season being extremely weak. So they brought a lot of rookies for the next season, and we'll talk more about how that went there. Anyways, you can follow me on my two channels, and you can follow me on my Twitter. Thank you, and take care.